Welcome, garden friends. Thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your garden to come visit mine. Spring has sprung, and today, believe it or not, we're talking all about daffodils. And even though for most parts of the country, and certainly here in Pittsburgh, daffodils are done, I've got some interesting things to talk about. And first, I want to tell you about how I fell in love with daffodils. And when I was about 7 years old, I went to this place called Lakeview Cemetery. It's where my grandparents are buried. They have a thing there called Daffodil Hill. It was started in the 1940s. And when I looked behind me, I saw Daffodil Hill, and I was profoundly affected by seeing those flowers. I didn't know they were daffodils at the time, but my mother always talked of Daffodil Hill. And so when I moved to this garden about 25 years ago, I told her I was going to make my own Daffodil Hill in memory of my grandparents. And so, as I said, the daffodils are done, but oh, it was quite a show. Just a great season for daffodils. But there are some jobs we can do now, and one of them is rejuvenating some daffodils that have been here for a long time. What happens is they grow really close together and they don't bloom as well as they should. That's going to be our first job. Then we're going to go out into the garden and mark some areas so we know where to plant our daffodils in the fall. And I know, again, hey, it's early in the spring, but we're already planning for our fall planting, and planning is part of the fun of gardening. And then I have a great surprise to show you. So let's get to work. All right, well, back in the day, we were taught to do this in the fall, and we would mark these areas with stakes and try and get in there, and we would end up cutting the bulbs to pieces. And so now experts say do this while the plant is in the green, when we can see it with the foliage. And so if you look close, you can see how tight these are. These are a variety called Van Scion, and they go way back. One of the first daffodils ever introduced into the States. And it's the first daffodil I ever saw blooming at my first garden. I just love them. They have a nice scent too, very early. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to take these clumps of bulbs, lift them, separate them. I'm going to basically toss the little ones, keep the big ones, put a little compost in here, and then replant the bulbs. We want to keep that foliage intact because that's what's going to feed the bulb. Let's just start with this clump right here. We'll probably still cut them to pieces, but at least we know where they are a little bit. Oh boy, they're in there. And the funny thing is, I did this about 10 years ago. But this variety, boy, it's just, oh, there they are. And so you can see all these little bulbs. And we'll just gently tease them apart, add compost, and replant. And I have a whole bunch here that need to be separated. What do we add when we plant anything? Of course, it's compost. I'm just going to put a little bit on the bottom of this. And all bulbs want good drainage. This is also going to help them bloom great. And you know what? If all goes well, they'll be blooming again next spring. Okay, these are the biggest. The question is, what do we do with the little ones that are left over? You know what a cheapskate I am. I guess I should plant them, but we'll think about it. I'm going to put these in for now. Like I said, we want to keep that foliage there. You know, they're not going to be happy with this. Not going to like it, but it's going to be worth it for next season. And one thing they are going to like is being put into this compost. Ooh, that one has 3 noses. All right. I squeeze another one at the end? I think so. All right. Now, I'm going to put a little bit more compost on top here. Got to figure out what to do with these. I'm going to split up more bulbs that are behind me so I have a great bloom season next spring. But join me down there closer to the driveway. We're going to mark some spots for next year's planting. Do it now because you'll never remember where those daffodils were or whatever bulbs you're planting. Always great to get your hands dirty. That's why we garden. So even though I took pictures of all the daffodils blooming, I want to be sure that I know where I'm going to be planting this fall. And so I just got some cheap bamboo stakes, cut them in half, and I'm just going to stick them here in kind of like a circle, and that'll say, okay, this area is good for planting. As we plant in the fall, it never fails. You're going to get too close to these, you're going to pop them out, and you know to move back. So let's get these in place. And I'm so glad I'm doing this, because usually it's right when the foliage is fading away and I'm like, where was everything? So I know I'm going to plant down here closer to the driveway. So we'll just put one every once in a blue moon here and give us an idea. Well, look what I found. Beautiful lily of the valley. I wonder how you feel about lily of the valley, because I love it. Oh man, that old-fashioned fragrance is to die for. I found a bunch of them here. I'm going to pick them and take them inside. Yeah, they grow like crazy, but I love them. I have a pink one too. Well, this is what we call a happy accident and a beautiful mistake, and my garden is filled with them. I had these bulbs sitting in my office until February and March. They should have been out in the cold. You know, bulbs need a cold treatment to bloom, but I didn't even think of that. I was procrastinating. We had that mild winter, and I finally got out and got them all planted. Now, as I said, most of the daffodils, they're done, but since these were planted so late, they're just coming into their prime, and I've got them all over the property. This gives me an idea for next fall to hold some back. Maybe I'll put some in the garage and have them their cold treatment, but I'm going to leave some inside and see if I can plant them later to extend the daffodil season. My obsession with daffodils goes so deep that imagine if I can get another 2 or 3 weeks out of them. And so just a wonderful, beautiful mistake.
Now it's time for Talking Trees from the Davey Tree Expert Company.
I'm joined again by Rob Kruljac. He's an Assistant District Manager for the Davey Tree Expert Company in the Pittsburgh North office, and we're going to learn all about planting a tree or shrub without actually planting a tree or shrub. It's kind of like Bruce Lee, the art of fighting without fighting. Rob, first off, what do you call this contraption here? We used this at the Home and Garden Show, and it was a huge hit. This is the way to explain how to plant a tree, but what do you call it?
Doug, actually, it came to me in a dream, and I think you came up with a name for it the other day that I kind of enjoyed. Do you remember what it was?
No.
No, I'm going to call it Mr. Thingy for now.
I'll have to think about that. What did I say it was? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Something smart alecky, I'm sure. So what is this going to show us?
So this is going to show us what's the most important things about planting a tree, which is planting the tree at the right depth when you plant it.
So when we're looking for a tree, balled and burlapped or in a container?
It really doesn't matter unless you treat the plant right when you go to plant it.
All right.
So if we start with something containerized.
Yeah, pull it out of here and see what it looks like.
So if we take a container plant, this one's dead, and that's why I brought it for demonstration purposes only. You know, you'll see
right.
that
all
in a container,
roots.
all these roots grow around the inside of the planter box or the container. And so what we need to do before we plant a container shrub is to trim these roots up the sides. So we're cutting these encircling roots and letting them now reform into the hole we're planting it
About how deep you go in there, and could you do too much?
You really can't do too much, so I'd go about the depth of the blades on your pruners. Ball and burlap's nicer, usually on your bigger plants that you buy to plant.
You know, I always expect you to bring just a nice little sapling,
right.
Not something that I have to put on a dolly to bring out here. I think you had a comment like, yes, things move better when they're on wheels.
Yes, they do.
Thank you.
It's very Egyptian. So ball and burlap's nice. Your bigger plant material usually comes balled and burlapped, right? So in order to plant this, first thing we want to do, before we dig the hole, before we do anything, is we want to discover where the bottom of this tree actually is. So I'm going to take the twine off, because this has to go anyway. You don't want to plant a tree with the twine on it.
You know, we talked about this several times where people will dig the hole way too deep, and then you've got to put the soil back in there So this is a way to tell before we go any further how deep we need to dig that hole.
Exactly, because you can backfill a hole to bring the tree up to the level you want, but that soil that you backfill with will still settle down and the tree will sink over time, okay? So if we just took the burlap off, right, the old saying, and it's still true in a number of ways, is you want to plant this tree slightly above grade, right? But what they don't understand is this isn't the bottom of the tree. So I like to use a little tool like this, nail puller or pry bar, which will allow me to come here very gently and excavate the soil away from the top of the root ball until I find the actual bottom of the tree.
And so this is another mistake people make, right? They assume that where that was.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we started up here. That's not where you want to plant. The bottom of the tree is still down here somewhere.
And this is also true even if it was in a container too. Like
Correct.
You got to get to that root flare, right?
Yeah. Any of your trees or plants you plant, the first step is to find actually the bottom of your plant. So as you can see, we started with the dirt at about this point on the trunk when before we started excavating, and now finally we're getting down to where the roots are coming off the bottom of the tree and flaring out into the dirt. Now that we have this, I'm going to take my measure and I'm going to measure the width of the root ball. Okay, so it's about 20 inches. So if my root ball is 20 inches, I want my hole to actually be 60 inches.
Ah, okay.
Right? Because we want to double the size of the hole at least, okay? So 20, actually I'm going to go to 40. So that's double 20. And then,
but if I wanted to dig it bigger, would it be better or not necessarily?
It wouldn't hurt. The wider the hole you dig using the original soil that you're planting into, amendments, it's a debate, but you should just plant with what you have because that's what the tree has to get used to. But you want this to be like a bowl shape hole, not just a drilled hole in the ground. You want to break those sides down. When you use an auger, you glaze the sides of the hole, which makes it harder for those fine root hairs to find their way into what they want to find.
So when I'm planting a tree, I need you to come and dig it because I'll never dig it right.
And what's nice is when you do this the right way, you don't have to dig as much.
I like that.
Right? The worst part about planting a tree is digging the hole.
No kidding.
So at this point, the hole doesn't have to be deep at all. Because I'm going to take this yardstick again, and now I want my hole to be about 7 inches deep. What we're sitting on is about 11. So I'm going to use some of my shims here for demonstration purposes.
2?
Let's start with 2.
See, and you don't want to be taking something that's this heavy in and out of the hole. Right. So measure it first. Do you need another one?
Yeah, 2 more, please.
All right.
And then and adding soil if you went too deep is great, but still that soil you add is going to settle over time and your tree is going to sink in that hole.
Right. You said before we started filming that if you do come into a situation where somebody had dug it too deep, when you put that in there, you got to kind of stomp it down,
right? You have to get in there and really pack it down because you want a solid base for that tree, this root ball to sit on, and then grow out from there.
Let's see what it looks like.
All right, let's put this tree in the hole. Let's not grab it by the trunk though. We want to grab it by the cage. All right, set it in the hole. That's looking pretty good.
What about the burlap and that cage that's around there?
All right, so imagine this. The black area is actually the whole size of the actual hole,
bigger.
Right? So once I have that in the right depth, I will go around with my razor blade knife and a pair of bolt cutters, which I didn't grab, and I'm going to take the burlap off and also trim the basket down.
Before we finish up, water for a spring planted tree or shrub.
Yes, very important. Devices such as gator bags or just like a soaker hose are very good. You don't have to, you want your soil to be moist, okay? Like this is too dry. I can't form a ball with it.
Should stick together, only not drip, right?
Right, you stick together, but if I squeeze it, I don't want water coming out.
And if we were to actually be planting this, then we'd remove, of course, these strings and it would leaf out.
Yep.
And then next year flower, and then we'd have a beautiful tree for 20 more years or longer.
Or longer, yes.
Always appreciate it.
Nice planting with you.
Ow. He's strong. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll follow me through the entire gardening season. We have a lot of fun stuff planned. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That's just how YouTube analytics work. And I would love to hear from you. What do you think of Lily of the Valley? And do you have a great daffodil story? Until next week, keep planting, and I'll see you then.